My name is Zoe. I am 26 years old, and this is my story. It is the story of my son, Leo. And it is the story of the man I had to find. His father, a man whose name I did not even know. I live in a very big city. The streets are always busy. There are tall buildings that touch the sky. There are so many people. They walk fast. They talk loud. But in this big, noisy city, I often felt very alone. My life was small. It was quiet. I worked in a little flower shop. The shop was a peaceful place. It smelled of roses and wet earth. I liked my job. I arranged flowers into beautiful bouquets. Flowers are quiet friends. They don't ask questions. They are just beautiful. My boss, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable, was very nice to me. She knew I was a quiet person. My apartment was small, on the 4th floor of an old building. It had one big window that looked out onto a busy street. But inside, it was my quiet space. I kept it very clean. I had a small bookshelf filled with stories. My life was a simple routine. I would wake up early. I would go to work at the flower shop. I would come home. I would make a simple dinner for one. Then I would read a book until I fell asleep. Every day was almost the same. I thought this was my life forever. Quiet, safe, and a little bit lonely. I had one close friend. Her name was Sarah. Sarah was the opposite of me. She was like sunshine. She was loud and funny and full of life. She loved parties. She loved meeting new people. I loved my quiet apartment. Sarah always tried to pull me out of my small world. "Zoe, you need to live a little," she would always say, laughing. "Come out with me. It will be fun." Usually I said no. I would make excuses. "I'm tired, Sarah," or "I have to work early tomorrow." But one Friday night, she would not take no for an answer. It was a friend's birthday party. She had a new dress she wanted to wear. "Please, Zoe," she begged, "just for a little while. If you hate it, we can leave. I promise." I don't know why, but that night I said yes. Maybe I was tired of being alone. Maybe I wanted to feel, just for one night, what it was like to be part of the noisy, bright city. So I went. The party was in a big apartment high up in a tall building. The music was so loud. I could feel it in my chest. The room was full of people. They were all laughing and dancing and shouting over the music. I felt very small, very shy. I wanted to go home immediately. I found a quiet corner and stood there, holding a cup of juice, just watching everyone. I felt like a little gray mouse in a room full of colorful birds. Then a man came over to my corner. He wasn't loud like the others. He had a gentle smile. His eyes were a very warm, kind brown color. He was holding a cup too. "It's a bit loud in here, isn't it?" he said. His voice was calm. I could hear him even with the loud music. I just nodded. I was too shy to speak. He didn't leave. He started talking to me. He asked my name. I told him. He asked what I did. I told him about the flower shop. He seemed interested. He asked what my favorite flower was. Lilies, I told him. They smell so nice. He smiled. I like them too, he said. He saw I was uncomfortable with the noise. Do you want to get some air? He asked. He pointed to a glass door. It led to a small balcony. I nodded again. I was happy to escape the noise. We went out onto the balcony. The music was softer here. The cool night air felt good. From the balcony, we could see the whole city. It was a sea of glittering lights. It was beautiful. We stood there for a long time without talking, just looking at the view. It was a comfortable silence. Then we started to talk, and it was so easy. He was a good listener. He asked me about my dreams. I felt a little silly, but I told him. I told him I dreamed of traveling one day. I wanted to see mountains and oceans. I wanted to see places from my books. He didn't laugh. He said, I hope you do that one day. The world is a big, beautiful place. He told me about himself. He said he worked with computers. He designed websites. It sounded very complicated to me. He said he loved to read. He told me about his favorite bookstore, a quiet place with a small cafe inside. He said I would like it. He was so different from other men I had met. He was gentle. He was calm. He made me feel safe. He made me feel seen. The night went by so fast. I don't remember what his name was. Maybe he told me and I forgot. Maybe I never asked. The city lights, his calm voice, the feeling of connection. It all felt like a dream. In that moment, his name didn't seem important. He was just this kind person who made me feel not so alone. Soon, Sarah came to find me. She was ready to go home. I had to leave. I said goodbye to the man with the kind brown eyes. He smiled at me. It was really nice meeting you, Zoe, he said. You too, I whispered. And then I left. As Sarah and I walked away, I looked back once. He was still standing on the balcony, watching me go. I felt happy, but also a little bit sad. I knew I would probably never see him again. It was just one night, a beautiful, short story in my quiet life. The next few weeks, my life went back to its normal, quiet routine. I went to the flower shop. I came home. I read my books, but something felt different. I often thought about that night, about the man on the balcony. I would look at the city lights from my window and remember our conversation. It was a sweet memory. Then my body started to feel strange. I was tired all the time, more tired than usual. Food I used to love started to taste bad. At first, I thought I was just sick. Maybe I had a flu. But after a few weeks, a different thought came into my mind. A scary thought. I went to a pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. My hands were shaking so much I could barely open the box. I went into my small bathroom. My heart was beating like a drum. I followed the instructions. Then I had to wait for 3 minutes. It was the longest 3 minutes of my life. I sat on the floor, staring at the little plastic stick on the counter. Please, please, be negative, I thought. After 3 minutes, I stood up on my weak legs. I picked up the test. I looked at it. There were 2 pink lines. Not 1, 2. Positive. The world seemed to stop. The sounds from the busy street outside my window faded away. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head. Pregnant. How could this happen? Then I knew. The party. The man with the kind eyes. The one beautiful night. It was real. And now, a part of that night was growing inside me. The first feeling was fear. A huge, cold wave of fear that washed over me. I was 22 years old. I was alone. I worked in a flower shop. My salary was small. How could I raise a baby? What would my boss say? What would people think? I slid down to the floor and I cried. I cried for a long, long time. I felt so lost, so scared. My quiet, predictable life was over. The first person I told was Sarah. I called her. I could barely speak. She heard the panic in my voice. She came to my apartment right away. She found me sitting on my kitchen floor. I showed her the test. She was shocked. She held my hand. "Oh, Zoe," she whispered. But then she hugged me. A big, strong hug. "It's okay," she said. "We will figure this out. You are not alone. I am here." Her words were a small light in my dark fear. The next few weeks were very difficult. I had to make a big decision. A decision that would change my whole life. I thought about everything. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I felt so confused. I didn't know the father. I couldn't tell him. He was a ghost, a memory. This was my problem, my responsibility. Then one morning, I was lying in my bed. The sun was streaming through my window. I put my hand on my stomach. It was still flat. I couldn't feel anything. But I knew there was a tiny life inside me. A life that was half me and half a kind stranger from a balcony. And in that quiet moment, I felt a sudden, fierce rush of love. It was a feeling I had never felt before. It was powerful. It was protective. This was my baby, my child. The fear was still there. It was very big. But this new feeling, this love, it was bigger. Right then, I made my decision. I was going to have this baby. I was going to be a mother. I would do it alone. It would be hard. I knew it would be the hardest thing I had ever done. But I knew, deep in my heart, that I could do it. I had to do it. For my baby. 9 months later, my son was born. The moment the nurse placed him in my arms, my world changed forever. He was so small, so perfect. He had a little bit of dark hair. He had tiny fingers that curled around mine. And when he opened his eyes, I saw them. The same warm, kind brown eyes as his father. My heart filled with so much love. It felt like it would burst. I named him Leo. It means lion. I wanted him to be strong and brave. Being a new mother was harder than I ever imagined. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless crying. Leo's crying, and sometimes my crying too. My quiet apartment was no longer quiet. It was filled with new sounds, new smells. It was messy. It was chaotic. I was tired all the time. My body hurt. My mind was foggy. Sometimes I would stand by his crib in the middle of the night, and I would think, can I really do this? Am I strong enough? But then Leo would do something amazing. He would make a little gurgling sound. He would give me a sleepy, milk-drunk smile. He would grab my finger with his whole tiny hand and hold on so tight. And in those small moments, I found my strength. This little boy needed me. He depended on me completely. The love I felt for him was like a powerful energy. It kept me going, even when I felt like I couldn't take another step. I had to go back to work. I was so worried. But Mrs. Gable, my boss at the flower shop, was a wonderful woman. She had children and grandchildren of her own. She understood. "Bring the little one here, Zoe," she said. "We'll make a space for him." So I did. I put a small, soft basket behind the counter. Leo would sleep there for hours, surrounded by the sweet smell of flowers. The customers loved him. They would peek into the basket and whisper about the flower shop baby. I was so grateful for Mrs. Gable's kindness. The years began to pass. 1 year, then 2, then 3. Leo grew from a tiny baby into a toddler, then into a little boy. He was my whole world. He learned to crawl, then to walk, then to run. My small apartment was filled with his toys, his books, his energy. He learned to talk, and his favorite word was Mommy. Hearing him call my name was the best sound in the world. Leo was a happy child. He was curious about everything. He loved animals. He loved stories. He had a bright, beautiful laugh that could make my hardest days feel better. He filled my life with a joy I had never known. The old loneliness was gone. I was never alone anymore. I had Leo. We were a team. But sometimes, late at night, after Leo was asleep, the old sadness would visit me. I would sit by his bed and watch his peaceful face. I would look at his brown eyes, his gentle smile, and I would see a ghost. I would see his father. I would wonder, who was that man? What was his life like? Did he have a family? Did he ever think about the quiet girl from the party? Did he know he had a beautiful son in the world? A part of me was angry at him for not being there. But another, bigger part of me was just sad. Sad for Leo. When Leo turned 4, he started going to a small daycare a few streets away. He made friends. He learned new things. But he also learned that other families were different from ours. Other children had a mommy and a daddy. One evening, I was picking him up from daycare. He was very quiet on the walk home. Usually, he told me all about his day. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked him. He looked up at me with his big, serious brown eyes. "Mommy," he said, his little voice so soft. "Where is my daddy? All the other kids have daddies." The question felt like a punch to my heart. I knew this day would come. I had practiced what I would say. But now, the moment was here, and I felt completely unprepared. My throat felt tight. I knelt down on the sidewalk so I could look into his eyes. "That's a very good question, Leo," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your daddy, he is a very good and kind person. He just doesn't know about you. He doesn't know where we are." It was the simplest truth I could give him. He seemed to accept my answer for a while, but the question didn't go away. It came back sometimes. When he saw a father push his child on the swings at the park, or when a friend's dad came to pick them up from daycare. "Mommy, will we ever find my daddy?" he asked one night before bed. Hearing that question, seeing the hope and sadness in his little face, changed something in me. For 4 years, I had accepted that his father was a ghost, a memory from one night. I had told myself that Leo and I were enough. But now, I saw that it wasn't just my story anymore. It was Leo's story too. He deserved to know who he was. He deserved to know where half of him came from. I looked at my brave, wonderful son, and I made a new promise. To him and to myself, I would try to find him. I would try to find the stranger from the balcony. I didn't know how. It felt impossible, like looking for one specific grain of sand on a giant beach. But for Leo, I had to try. The search for my baby's father had begun. Starting the search felt like standing at the bottom of a huge mountain. I had no idea how to even begin climbing. I had so little information. A man, kind brown eyes, worked with computers, liked a bookstore. It was almost nothing. For 5 years, I had pushed the memory of him away. Now I had to pull it back. I had to remember every single detail. My first step felt obvious. I had to go back to the beginning, back to the party. I called Sarah. I was nervous to tell her what I was doing. "Sarah," I said, "do you remember that party? Your friend Mark's birthday party? 5 years ago." "Vaguely," she said, laughing. "I remember you met a guy on the balcony." "Why?" My heart beat a little faster. "I need to talk to Mark," I said. "I need to ask him about that night." I told her my plan. I told her it was for Leo. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, Zoe. I'll call him for you. We'll figure this out." A few days later, Sarah and I met Mark at a coffee shop. He was a nice man. He was married now. He remembered Sarah, of course. He vaguely remembered me. I explained why I was there. I felt so embarrassed. My face was hot. I told him I was looking for a man I met at his party. I described him. Quiet, gentle smile, brown eyes. Mark listened patiently. He looked thoughtful. He tried to remember. "I'm so sorry, Zoe," he said finally. "There were so many people at that party. Friends of friends. I can't place him. I really wish I could help." My heart sank. My first step was a dead end. I felt so stupid. This was a hopeless idea. I thanked Mark for his time and left the coffee shop feeling heavy with disappointment. "Don't give up, Zoe," Sarah said, hugging me. It was just the first try. I tried not to give up. I went home, and I sat in my quiet living room after Leo was asleep. I closed my eyes. I tried to transport myself back to that balcony. What else did we talk about? I focused on his words, his voice. Computers, websites, okay, and the bookstore. He was very specific about the bookstore. He said it was his favorite place in the whole city. He said it had a small cafe and the best coffee. And I remembered something else, a small detail. He mentioned the name, or part of the name. It was something about a tree, an oak tree. The next day, I took Leo to the library. I used their computer. I searched for bookstores with cafes in the city with oak in the name. A list appeared. There were 3 of them. The Winding Oak, Oak Tree Books, and the Royal Oak. A little spark of hope flickered inside me. This was a real clue, a real place I could go. So a new weekend routine started for me and Leo. We called them our bookstore adventures. Every Saturday, we would visit one of the bookstores. I would buy Leo a new picture book. We would sit in the little cafe. I would drink a cup of coffee, and I would watch. I watched every man who walked in. I looked for kind brown eyes, for a gentle smile, for a ghost. It was exhausting. Every time a man who looked a little bit like him walked in, my heart would jump. But it was never him. Weeks turned into months. We visited all 3 bookstores many times. I got to know the people who worked there. They would smile at me and Leo. Back again, they would say. I started to feel foolish again. I was chasing a memory. A man who probably didn't even live in the city anymore. A man who would never recognize me. Leo was happy on our adventures. He loved the new books, but I was losing hope. The spark was getting smaller and smaller. One rainy Saturday afternoon, we were at the Royal Oak. It was my favorite of the 3. It was cozy and warm. The owner was a kind woman in her 60s named Alara. She had silver hair and wore bright, colorful scarves. She always had a kind word for Leo. I was sitting at our usual little table by the window. Leo was quietly looking at a book about dinosaurs. I was stirring my coffee, feeling very sad. I decided this would be the last time. This search was hurting me. It was filling me with false hope and disappointment. I had to stop. I had to accept my life as it was. Alara came over to our table. She was holding a cookie on a small plate. For the little dinosaur expert, she said, smiling at Leo. He beamed and said, "Thank you." Then she looked at me. Her eyes were very perceptive. "You seem sad today, Zoe," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" I don't know why, but her kindness broke down my walls. All the frustration, the sadness, the loneliness of my search came pouring out. I told her everything. I told her the whole story. The party, the man on the balcony, his kind eyes, my son Leo, my impossible search. I told her that this bookstore was my last hope, and now that hope was gone. I was crying a little bit by the end. I felt so silly, telling my secret story to a stranger in a bookstore. Alara didn't say anything for a long time. She just listened. She put her warm hand on my arm. She didn't judge me. She didn't look shocked. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, looking thoughtfully at the bookshelves. A quiet man with kind brown eyes, who loves to read and works with computers, she said slowly, as if tasting the words. You know, your story reminds me of someone. There was a young man who used to be a regular here. He came in every weekend. He always sat at this very table. She pointed to my table. My heart stopped. He was very quiet, very polite, she continued. He fit your description. He always drank black coffee and read for hours. I remember we talked once about his work. He was a web designer. I could barely breathe. What was his name? I whispered. It was a few years ago, Alara said, thinking hard. I believe his name was Daniel. Yes, Daniel. But he stopped coming. It must be, 3 or 4 years ago now. One day he told me he was moving. He said he was tired of the big city. He was moving to a smaller, quieter town. Daniel, his name was Daniel. I had a name, a real name. It felt like the sun coming out after a long, dark storm. I felt a huge surge of hope, so strong it made me dizzy. Did he say which town? I asked, my voice trembling with excitement. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I don't remember that, she said, looking sad for me. But he gave me his business card once, in case the bookshop ever needed a new website. I might still have it somewhere. She went behind the counter and started looking through an old wooden box filled with cards and papers. It felt like an eternity. Leo had finished his cookie and was now trying to make his toy dinosaur roar. I held my breath. Ah, here it is, she said, pulling out a small, simple white card. She handed it to me. My hands were shaking as I took it. On the card, in simple black letters, it said, Daniel Carter, web design. And then there was a website address and an email. Daniel Carter. I said the name over and over in my head. Daniel Carter. It wasn't a ghost's name. It was a real name. I looked at Alara, my eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they were tears of gratitude. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. I hope you find what you're looking for, dear, she said, patting my hand. I left the bookstore feeling like I was floating on air. I had a name. I had an email address. This changed everything. The mountain didn't seem so big anymore. I had found a path. That night, after Leo was fast asleep, I opened my old laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed the website address from the business card into the search bar and hit enter. A simple, elegant website appeared. It was a portfolio for a web designer. And on the About Me page, there was a photograph. My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded against my ribs. It was him. He was a little older. His hair was a little shorter, but it was absolutely him. The same gentle smile. The same kind, warm brown eyes that I saw every single day in my son's face. Daniel Carter. I stared at his picture for what felt like hours. He was real. He was a real person. All these years, he had been out there, living his life. I felt 1,000 different emotions all at once. Relief, fear, anger, hope. What do I do now? I read every word on his website. He had written a small biography. It said he grew up in a small town, moved to the city for a while, and then moved back to a quiet town called Stonebridge Creek to run his own business. Stonebridge Creek. That's where he was. I found his contact information. There was the email address, and there was also a phone number. What do you say? How do you start that conversation? Hello, you don't know me, but you have a 5-year-old son. It sounded insane. I knew I couldn't do it in an email or on the phone. This was too big, too important. If he was going to meet his son, and if Leo was going to meet his father, it had to be in person. I had to see his face. I had to know what kind of man he really was. I made a decision. It was the scariest decision of my life. The next weekend, I was going to drive to Stonebridge Creek. I was going to find the house of Daniel Carter, and I was going to knock on his door. The drive to Stonebridge Creek took 2 hours. Sarah agreed to watch Leo for the day. I told him I had to go do something important for work. I felt bad lying to him, but I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. My hands were slippery on the steering wheel. My stomach was in knots. What was I doing? Was this a crazy idea? What if he was married? What if he had a family, other children? What if he slammed the door in my face? What if he was angry? My mind was filled with a million scary what ifs. Several times, I almost turned the car around and went back home. Back to my safe, quiet life. But then I thought of Leo. I thought of his big, brown eyes asking, "Where is my daddy?" That thought gave me courage. I kept driving. Stonebridge Creek was a small, charming town. It had a main street with little shops and a river that ran through the middle with an old stone bridge. It was peaceful. It was the kind of place a person like Daniel would live. I found his address on his website. It was a small house on a quiet street lined with big trees. The house had a pretty garden in the front and a dark blue door. I parked my car across the street, and I just sat there. For almost an hour, I sat in my car, staring at the blue door. I couldn't move. My fear was like a heavy blanket. I practiced what I would say. "Hello, Daniel. My name is Zoe. We met a long time ago." It all sounded so weak, so strange. Finally, I told myself, "Zoe, you came all this way. You have to do this for Leo." I took a deep, shaky breath, opened the car door, and got out. My legs felt like jelly. Every step towards that blue door felt like walking through deep mud. I reached the door. I raised my hand. I hesitated for a second. Then I knocked. The seconds I waited felt like years. I heard footsteps inside. The doorknob turned. The door opened, And there he was, Daniel Carter. He looked just like his picture. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. He looked surprised to see a stranger at his door. "Yes, can I help you?" he asked. His voice, it was exactly the same. Calm and gentle. My own voice got stuck in my throat. I just stared at him for a second. "Daniel," I finally managed to whisper. "My name is Zoe. We met a long time ago at a party in the city." He frowned slightly, confused. He searched my face, trying to remember. I could see the moment it clicked. A flicker of recognition in his eyes. His expression changed from confusion to surprise. "Zoe," he said slowly. "The girl from the flower shop. On the balcony. I remember you." He remembered me. A huge wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't just a crazy stranger. "Can I please talk to you?" I asked, my voice still shaking. "It's very, very important." He looked worried by my serious tone, but he nodded. "Of course, come in." He led me into his house. It was simple and tidy inside. There were bookshelves everywhere, filled with books. A big computer sat on a desk in the corner. I looked around quickly. There were no signs of a wife or children. No toys. No family photos on the walls. He lived alone. We sat down in his small living room. An awkward silence filled the room. I didn't know how to start. There's no easy way to say what I had to say, so I just said it. "Daniel," I started, looking at my own hands, because I was too scared to look at his face. "I am so sorry to just show up here like this, but I had to find you. That night we met. It was a wonderful night for me. But something happened after that night. I found out I was pregnant." I looked up at him then. His face was completely white. He was staring at me, his eyes wide with shock. He didn't say a word. He looked like he couldn't breathe. I had to keep going. "I have a son," I said, my voice trembling. "His name is Leo. He is 5 years old. Daniel, he is your son." I reached into my bag and pulled out my wallet. I took out my favorite picture of Leo. It was taken last summer at the park. He was laughing, his head tilted back, his brown eyes sparkling in the sun. I held it out to Daniel. "This is him," I said. His hand was trembling as he took the small photograph. He stared at it. He looked from the picture of the laughing boy to my face, and then back to the picture. I could see him connecting the dots. He saw the eyes. He saw his own smile on our son's face. He was silent for a very long time. The only sound in the room was the quiet ticking of a clock on the wall. I just sat there and let him have the silence. I let him process the impossible news I had just dropped into his quiet life. Finally, he looked up from the photo. His own eyes were filled with tears. "My son," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of awe and disbelief. "I have a son." Then he started to ask questions. Softly, gently. "Why didn't you? How did you?" He told me his side of the story. He said he was very shy back then. Talking to me on the balcony was the bravest thing he had done all year. He said he wanted to ask for my phone number, but he was too scared. He thought I was too beautiful, too special. He thought I would say no. He felt foolish and heartbroken after I left. A few months later, he left the city. He never forgot me, he said. He just never thought he would see me again. He wasn't angry. He wasn't mad at me for not finding him sooner. He was just sad, deeply sad for all the years he had missed. 5 years, he kept saying, shaking his head. I missed 5 years of his life. Then he looked at me, his eyes full of a new, fragile hope. Can I meet him, Zoe? He asked, his voice breaking. Please, can I meet my son? Yes, I said, tears running down my own face now. Yes, Daniel, that's why I'm here. That day was the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We didn't magically fall in love and become a perfect family. Life is much more complicated than that. The next weekend, Daniel drove to the city. I arranged for them to meet in a neutral place, the park near my apartment. I was so nervous. How would Leo react? I told Leo that a very special friend of mine was coming to meet us. A friend who had wanted to meet him for a very long time. We were sitting on a bench when Daniel walked up. He looked so scared, but he was smiling. I introduced them. Leo, this is Daniel. Daniel knelt down so he was the same height as Leo. It is so wonderful to finally meet you, Leo, he said, his voice soft. Leo, who is usually shy with new people, just stared at Daniel. He looked at his face for a long time, at his kind, brown eyes. Then, Leo did something that made my heart melt. He smiled. A small, shy smile. Daniel's face broke into a huge, relieved grin. They spent the whole afternoon together. Daniel was amazing. He was patient and gentle. He didn't push. He let Leo lead. They threw a ball. He pushed Leo on the swings, higher and higher. He bought him a bright blue ice cream that dripped all over his hands. I watched them from a bench. This man who was a stranger a week ago, and this little boy who was my whole world. They looked right together. That was the start. Daniel became a part of our lives, a real part. He drives to the city every single weekend. He is not my partner. We are not in love. We are something different. We are parents. We are a team for Leo. Daniel is a wonderful father. He is teaching Leo how to build things with blocks. He reads him bedtime stories over the phone every night. He is making up for lost time, one weekend at a time. And Leo is so happy. He has a daddy now. A daddy who adores him, who plays with him, who loves him. The questions have stopped. Now, he just has happy stories to tell about his weekends with his dad. And me, I found something too. I found peace. The heavy secret I carried for so long is gone. My life is not built on a lonely silence anymore. It is built on an open, honest, and sometimes complicated truth. Seeing Leo and Daniel together, laughing in the park, fills my heart with a quiet, steady joy. I am not completely alone in raising him anymore. I have a friend, a co-parent, a strange but wonderful little family. My name is Zoe. My son's father was a stranger, but now he is a father. And I am a mother who found the courage to search for an answer. The journey was long and scary, but it led us here, to this new, unexpected, and beautiful life. If you are listening to this, and maybe you feel lost or scared, please know that you are stronger than you think. It is okay to be afraid. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is take that first small step into the unknown. You never know what you might find. You might even find the piece you didn't know was missing. Just keep going. You can do this.